This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. And this is going up on game day.
Okay, sweet.
So the Browns play the Chiefs today, and I'm bringing in Ryan Tracy. I always bring him in, any excuse I get. I saw the Chiefs on the preseason schedule, and I was like, well, got to find a reason to bring in Ryan.
Thanks for having me back.
No problem. I think my viewers think I just bring you on to gush about Pat Mahomes because
you do a better job than I do.
It's just he does stuff you never seen before, and it's like if you really appreciate the game and you see him do it, it makes you feel like an idiot for studying it this much because you're just like, oh, he could just do. It's like when you get like a fight instructor trying to like teach somebody, oh, you got to do this and you got to be real tight with your technique and all of this, and it's like a 14-step process, and it's going to take you 2 years to get black belt, and then the first time you do an example with this one kid, he just flips you over, and it's like, or you could just be that guy,
right? Yeah.
But it's interesting the position the Browns are in because like the Browns, roster-wise, I feel like they've been a good team roster-wise since like 2018. The issue with them has been consistency at quarterback, right? You had the 1.5 year of Baker Mayfield where he was able to be consistent. And then outside of that, you know, it's been a number of guys. We had Tyrod Taylor through here, that time period, Jacoby Brissett, you know, these kind of like stopgap solutions to try to figure out something while we try to wait for Baker Mayfield to stabilize. Now they made the big move for Deshaun Watson, hoping that that's going to be the move that puts him over the top. But if you look at this Browns team, I think since 2019, when they got quarterback played at Pro Football Focus, and again, take it with a grain of salt, it is Pro Football Focus, grades over 70, which is like their starting caliber grade. So if you got a 70 or higher, it's what a starting caliber quarterback would do. The Browns have a win percentage that puts them at like 11 wins each year. The roster's been fine. I think when we say there's a team that's a quarterback away, sometimes we don't quantify that as much as we should and ask ourselves, what has that team done when they've had decent quarterback play at times? The Browns are pretty proof in the pudding. Yeah, you put these guys on the team, you have decent quarterback play. They're a team that, I mean, they almost beat the Chiefs in the playoffs a couple of years ago. And so this is a weird team in a weird place where they know what they can be, but they know what they haven't been the last couple of years. And for the Chiefs, I'm interested in knowing, like, what was that? When did you know with Pat? And I wonder if it was early, like, oh, okay, this is why you moved on from Alex Smith. Like, this is the reward of getting on from him and taking that risk, because I imagine going from something that was pretty stable at the time with Alex Smith to a complete unknown in Pat Mahomes at the time, that had to be somewhat stressful. I bet there's a lot of like awkward takes that are out there from people around the Chiefs sphere before they realize what it was.
Starting with me, because I had him behind Deshaun in the draft. So I was like, oh, it's going to take him a while to work out his feet. Like, he's got some work to do. He's not going to have this impact. And then literally, like, the last game of his rookie season, the only time he got to play, it's like, oh, I guess he figured it out. So we're good. You know, about halfway through that season, it was Travis that gave it away, because Travis had been in there and he'd been a big proponent of Alex Smith. And like, you know, whenever anybody started doubting him, he was the first one to speak up. And he was in coach's ear and he's like, we got to have Alex. We got to do this and this.
You're talking about Travis Kelce?
Yeah. And literally halfway through that season, the tone, it just turned. and he's in the locker room one day, and I can't remember who was interviewing him, but he's like, Alex is the greatest, man, but you gotta see what this kid can do. And then it was like, oh, it's out. And it's on, and that was it. It was all gas from there.
It took him 8 weeks of practice to be like, "Hey, man, 15 got something going over here.
You gotta see this."
And I mean, he was right with that bet. Like, you know, going with Pat Mahomes. I mean, it's been especially beneficial for his career. He's kind of been his go-to guy, and it's interesting when an organization tries to flip the switch there. There are certain like difficulties that you have if you did not have any kind of success prior. And the Browns are in the situation where kind of some success, and then 2 losing seasons back to back. What do you worry about when you see a team that's obviously talented like that, but the quarterback position just hasn't been stable, so they've been losing a lot more than they should? Do you worry about that, like creating some unpleasant dynamics in the locker room where it might be more of a hurdle to win than it usually should be?
The only thing that I would worry about is like that pressure that, guys are going to look to you when you're the quarterback, no matter what. Right. And like, if they're looking at you like, come save us, that makes a difference. It puts the pressure on there. And obviously Sean's had a lot of pressure basically since his second year, and that is the only thing that I worry about, is that relationship of how the coaches treat him with that. Is that pressure filled as well? Or is there a way to alleviate that from week to week to week? And the thing that I noticed, and the thing that I've liked about their offseason, is they clearly feel that that's something that they can solve, and they're going to work that through. And it might not be a fast evolution. I don't know. Maybe it will. But they seem to be comfortable with it when they go out and they get the tackle, and they go out and they get Cedric, who I was super big on, and I love that fit. And I think that's going to work out really, really well in Cleveland. But that tells you that, like, okay, we're comfortable now. We're going to give him what he needs. We're not trying to build the defense to support him on the backside, right, and keep the scores down. Like, we're ready to roll with him. We're going to give him the weapons. We're going to give him the protection and let him go after it. That is a positive sign in my mind.
And you talked about it there with the Cedric Tillman. I think one of the biggest changes that the Browns made, and I think the most beneficial changes that they made, and you could tell this is how you can signify a change in the offense, is you look at the wide receivers, especially with the passing stuff, right? Browns, for the longest time, they had these West Coast wide receivers, which are, 6-foot guys who can get yak. Your Odells of the world, your Jarvis Landrys. Like, there was a very clear archetype that they were looking for. They get Deshaun, and they still have, like an Elijah Moore type who's going to be able to do some screens, some of that Deebo Samuel stuff, whatever they want him to do. But you also have Coop in there. You also have a Cedric Tillman who gives you a different body type that you've had in there to go along with the Donovan Peoples-Jones. And I think sometimes we focus so much on the star names of wide receiver that we forget that there are certain roles that they need to play within that offense. It's not just Madden. You can't just stack all the 90 overalls over there. You got to make sure they fit. It's the beauty of the Bengals offense where, it's one thing to have 3 great wide receivers, but those 3 great wide receivers are all great at 3 different things. You know what I mean? Like, that's what makes them difficult, because they can play without any friction, because you can ask them all 3 to do different things, and they're not really kind of share the same real estate. And I think that was one of the biggest things that the Browns could have done for this team. But you look at this roster, it's a talented roster, right? You have guys like Myles Garrett on one side, Denzel Ward, who has been looked at as one of the better corners, Darius Smith, who, he's pressure king, right? Last year, at least, somebody who's looked at very favorably. You look at the other side of the ball, and you can go to Deshaun, who's been a 3-time Pro Bowler, Nick Chubb, who arguably one of the best, if not the best running backs in all of football. And the thing that I'm wondering is, when teams have faced the Browns for the last 3 years since 2019, it's been, first and foremost, what do we do about Nick Chubb, right? That's been the game plan. When the Chiefs played the Browns in the playoffs, let's make sure Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt don't kill us, right? I remember talking to you, and that's like the first thing you were worried about is that rushing attack, right? Mike Tomlin, every time he plays the Browns, he just starts talking about Nick Chubb for 30 minutes. And that's what defensive coordinators, the focus has been. And the interesting thing is, hey, if Deshaun can get back to playing at the level that he was, where he was, one of the better young quarterbacks, all of a sudden, Nick Chubb's not the focus defensively, right? You have to focus on somebody else. And what does that production that Nick Chubb has given you, over 5 yards a carry for 5 years in the NFL? It's got to be a record. What does that turn into as far as efficiency when Nick Chubb becomes an afterthought to the defense? And what kind of problems does that create for teams when it's like, hey, our ability to adjust if Deshaun's killing us is limited, because we're not going to cloud. Like, we're not going to just go crazy and go into dime, or get light with our personnel packages, because Nick Chubb's still going to be out there. And if Nick Chubb's killing you, what do you do there, right? You can't put 10 in the box like you used to. You might have to just say, hey, we're just going to go to base, and we got to make some stops. You know what I mean? And that's going to make their offense's life easier. Like, what do you think with the elite teams in AFC? Like, what adjustments do you think they can make if those things are both firing on all cylinders?
Well, the teams that are prepared, the ones that have stocked up to be able to defend anyone, the ones that have stocked up to defend the Bengals, say, if you can go physical with the outside and play man so you can bring somebody else down in the box, you got a chance. Do I think it's going to work? No. I think this might be Nick Chubb's best productive season, to tell you the truth. Because if they throw the ball around enough, they're going to pull somebody out of that box, and he's going to have room. And he doesn't need that much. And I know every year that goes by for running back, you got to start worried about, is he going to be able to hit that top gear anymore, that kind of thing. I'm not worried about it. The only guy I think should be worried about Nick Chubb's performance is probably Jerome Ford. So right now, just let Nick do his thing. I think he's going to be fine, but there's going to be that balance. Somebody's going to feel like, oh, we can just man up on the outside and bring somebody down. It'll be fine. And then it's like, who's got the best matchup? Who can get loose? My bet is probably going to be Moore or Cooper, but you got 4 legitimate targets. You're going to have a chance to get a lot done. It's whether you're clicking with the coordinator's call and Deshaun's arm and taking the windows that you get. I think there's going to be plenty to pick off that tree. The question is going to be, are you ready to take it all?
Yeah. I'm going to be intrigued by what teams do, what the Browns can do with that, because the expectations are going to be so crazy. Saw about somebody in Elijah Moore, who I'm sure you remember from when he came out a couple years ago. He was an interesting case where you look at his stuff in New York, it doesn't look bad at all. Like you look at his splits with certain quarterbacks and you're like, oh, I think I found a problem here. Like, and I remember going through this with Odell, where I was very, very willing to stand on 10 toes when it comes to, I thought Odell was a fine player in Cleveland. Just, he was not in a situation where he was going to be able to get the numbers that he wanted to get because, the quarterback, for whatever reason, just couldn't find him. And that happens. Like, it's not necessarily just because a quarterback's bad that happens. Like, bad quarterbacks have great relationships with good wide receivers all the time. I remember Brandon Weeden was great with Josh Gordon back in the day. So it's sometimes it's just, hey, look, when this guy gets to the top of his drop, the wide receivers just not ready, right? Or whatever happens, their timing, they're just not working at the same pace. And I think that's a lot of what was happening with Elijah. What do you expect of him in this situation where he's kind of in a spot where they're like, hey, we need somebody to be a playmaker on this team? Amari Cooper, I like to call him like a baseball. He's a good double hitter, right? He'll get on base.
Right.
He get you a first down, he get you 10, 20-yard chunks, but he's not going to be the home run hitter. He's in this spot to where, he goes from a little bit neglected out there in New York to, hey, now we're kind of relying on you. What do you think that's going to do for him, and what do you see him being able to do in that situation?
For me, it's getting the ball in his hands fairly quickly, but I think if you're going to run, especially short play action, he's the guy you got to go to, in my opinion. I mean, you can move Njoku as well. Like, I do like him on the short routes where he can get the ball in his hand, turn. But for Moore, man, if you can set him up to play in a way, it doesn't have to be like, I don't want to compare everybody to Chiefs, but if you move the guy around kind of like Andy did with Tyreek when he was still learning to play the position, right? Just get him where he's got advantageous angles and matchups to start with, and just get him the ball as quickly as you can. But that play action is going to be key, and I think that's going to open up things for him, especially if you're going to try to drag him, if you're going to try to get him behind the linebackers and just hit him as he clears. I think Deshaun's really good at those type of maneuvers that can get the ball in his hands and let him go. Then you're going to be tempted to hold the ball a little bit longer and run that long fake and try to get it over the top to somebody. But I think Moore's really going to be the guy that's going to move it early. They'll probably drop somebody down. They'll give him an extra mirror. They're going to put that safety in the box, the coverage type box guy, and try to let him cut off some of those routes. And then you're going to get a chance to go away from him, and he's going to get those huge chunks later because you just got to run those concepts that take doubles, take coverage, take especially, a single high, and make him pay attention to the other side of the field so that you can get a little bit more one-on-one later on the outside. I think later in the season, as you train defenses to attack somebody else, he's going to be the guy that makes the punch like in November. And I think that might be the key.
Now, let's talk about the greater AFC landscape. There's some teams that have been trying to get into that picture, right? I mean, there's like the Chiefs and the Bengals are the two mainstays right now the last couple of years, but even we go all the way back to just the first MVP year for Pat, 2018, this landscape has changed dramatically, right? Brady's left, he's retired, all of these things have changed over. The top quarterbacks, I talk about it with Deshaun all the time, is it's kind of hard to gauge where he would be in today's NFL, even if he never had any things pop up over the last 2 years, because from 2020, when he left the field in 2020, and then he got on the field in 2023, we're talking about Justin Herbert being in that class. We're talking about Joe Burrow being in that class. We're talking about Josh Allen elevating himself and getting himself into that class. That's three guys who stepped up and kind of took his space in there where he was standing in the league, where it was previously empty. It's kind of why he got the 3 Pro Bowls, because before that draft class especially, it was a drought of NFL quarterbacks coming into the league from before about 2016. So now he steps into this landscape that's ever changing. The AFC landscape changing. You got the Jets building something there with Aaron Rodgers. I don't know how seriously we're going to take Denver this year, given what happened to them last year, but it's still a very talented team. Russ has had success in the past, and Sean Payton's there, who's been successful as a coach there as well. You have the number 1 overall pick from a couple years ago, and Trevor Lawrence, infinitely talented quarterback, with a very young, talented Jacksonville team. They got a lot of decent really good players on that defense as well that I like. When you look at this landscape and you see these new teams kind of pop up, Cleveland in there as well, maybe Baltimore has a resurgence with the new offensive coordinator. Maybe they get the most out of Lamar they gotten in a while. You see all of these teams that are kind of like, that have kind of moved to the back of the line, that are ready to kind of take charge at the front of the line. And then you have teams like the Bills who, there's some issues there with Stephon Diggs and what he wants to do there. Josh Allen looked really good his first half of the season. In the second half, we started to see some of the old Josh Allen stuff. Justin Herbert, whatever happened to him in that playoff game, whatever happened with Brandon Stokely in that playoff game. But there's a lot of teams gunning for spots that just aren't available right now in AFC. What do you see from all of those teams trying to come up that makes you concerned about the matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs, specifically, given that, you guys have been successful for a very long time, a lot of really long seasons. You're coming off of a Super Bowl. Is there some worry of a combination of a Super Bowl hangover plus maybe the hungriest conference that we've seen in football in the last 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, the AFC is the NFC of what, 5-6 years ago, right? Like, it has all flipped. And I do worry about that. We're talking about, what is it? I have to do the quick math. It's over 80 games in the last 4 seasons. I mean, that's nuts all by itself. So when you get to that point, you always got to worry about attrition. And they got a little bit younger in some places, specifically the defensive backfield. They look good there. They look hungry there. But there are other spots. Offensive line, they haven't been able to get a whole lot of youth there. Joe Tooney is up there, right? Donovan Smith's going to play left tackle for him now. So it's going to be about the edge rushers. It's going to be who's coming after them. You got guys up and down the AFC that are really built to be there. And Miami's one team in particular that I think is going to cause some concerns out there. Yeah. Right? It's that easy, right? And nothing against
they just have Jerry, Judy, and Tyreek over there.
Yeah. Hey, what little thing. Hey, this Waddle kid's pretty good too. I mean, what are you going to do?
Oh yeah, Waddle and Tyreek, not Judy. That's Denver.
Yeah, right. Well, it might be for right now. You never know what's going to happen. But I mean, there's plenty that's coming after it. The one that intrigues me the most right now is the crumbling of Buffalo versus like the really, really quiet, what I think is a slow burn ascension in Jacksonville. Because I agree with you. I think they got some nice guys on defense that are young. I think Lawrence is going to put it together here really quickly as he comes super comfortable with what Doug wants to do. Being part of that tree, like I can see where Doug's trying to go with it. He's not the same kind of quarterback he's had in the past, so he's got a little bit of new wrinkles. He's got a little bit of new energy. It's going to bring something there. The run game is deceptively helpful in Jacksonville, too. I think people forget about that a little bit too much. So I think they're really strong. What we had hoped maybe Indianapolis was going to be 2 years ago, Jacksonville Jaguars might be this year. And in that division, they got free reign. I don't see any competition coming for them, to tell you the truth.